Hello, since January 1974, there have been a series of attacks on. A woman in the Seattle area of Washington state was found wearing a mask and sneaking into a home. Girls late at night, then he used a stick to beat them unconscious and violated them in. Within 6 months, almost every month there are some girls reported missing. The suspect also gradually increased the scope of activities. His actions from initial robberies and assaults turned into murders. Later, the victims were all girls. Beautiful young, mostly college students with long hair parted in the middle. Suspects always wear masks when committing crimes and handling. The scene was carefully investigated, making the police investigation difficult until one night in June 1974. Late last night, a girl named Joran Hawken disappeared in an alley on her way home. The next day, the police searched the alley but could not find her. Witnesses saw a man fighting at the place where the girl was. Disappeared that night, the man was holding a briefcase and had a cast on his leg due to limited clues, so the police could not find the man on Jan's relative's body. He was a journalist. After learning about the incident, they publish relevant articles and attract public attention. Over the past 6 months, there has been a series of disappearances of young women in Seattle, making local people extremely worried. The police compiled information of some missing women and discovered that the time they went missing coincided with the exam time of universities in the area, where most of them went missing. Near the construction site, many witnesses saw a man with a cast on his leg driving a car. The circumstances of the cases are somewhat similar, so the police believe that the perpetrator could be the same person as on October 14, 1974. 1 month passed. There were 5 young girls on vacation on Bay Beach at the park in Lake Mike State in Washington state. At that time, there was a handsome man wearing a suit. The white tennis player approached them with one arm wrapped in bandages and introduced himself to the girls as a fall because his hand was injured, so he wanted to ask the 5 of them to help him lift a cabin boat out of the 4-speed car. The cousin refused it, but a young girl of 2 or 3 years old enthusiastically agreed to help him, so she followed the man to the car. But then she also heard about the recent series of disappearances in the locality. When she found out there was no sailboat in the car, seeing that the situation was not good, she immediately turned around and ran to a crowded place. Her vigilance helped the girl luckily escaped. That same day, 2 more girls were reported missing from the park by multiple witnesses. A suspicious man with a bandaged hand was seen. Police drew a portrait of the suspect based on the description. Witnesses and posters posted all over the streets of Zato Police Station also receive hundreds of tips every day. Among them pointed to the same suspect. That person is T. Bundy, 28 years old, a student. Local university student with excellent grades in school, and is a top student with no criminal record. Police also found 8 witnesses of that day at the park and showed them photos of the test. However, 7 of the 8 of them said it was not him. The police also said that people like Test are unlikely to commit crimes, and because there is no license. So the police actually released him when he was in high school. He was arrested many times for theft, but when he became an adult, those criminal records were erased for unknown reasons. A hiker reported to police that he discovered a skeleton some distance from the state park. The car was found 3 km away from the lake after receiving the report from the police. 2 more skeletons were added. A total of 3 skeletons were confirmed. Are all girls who were reported missing recently. One of them is college student Joran, who went missing after the incidents. Consecutive cases in Seat. Also many cases of missing women in Lake City State, Utah. That time people see search found the bodies of 2 girls naked in the forest. The victims had many bruises and signs of being violated. The victim may have been sexually assaulted after death. The cause of death was suffocation. The suspect was very careful and cleaned up. The crime scene was very clean, so the police got very few clues at that time. The states in the U.S. do not exchange information, so they do not know that the consecutive cases in the Washington seat and the cases consecutively in Lake City not long ago actually, all were done by the same person until November 8, 2018. 1974, that night it was raining lightly. A girl suddenly rushed into the police station in Lake City in Utah to report crime of girl named Carol Daron, 18 years old. The telephone operator said that she planned to drive to the bookstore after work that day to read a book while she was there. A handsome guy came up to him and admitted he was a police officer and said that someone was trying to steal Miss Karen's car. She didn't know how he found her, but she still decided to follow the man to the parking lot on the street. Khan was suspicious and asked to see his underwear, but the man just smiled and ignored her. To the parking lot, Khan discovered that his car was indeed missing. At that time, the man thought that the car might have been towed away and asked her to go to the nearby security checkpoint to make a report. Karen hesitated for a moment then, because she was impatient to get the car back, so she went with the man. The man went to a remote building nearby but still couldn't find the car. At that time, the man said the car was gone. Could have been taken to the police station, and he could have driven her there on the way. Khan found out H direction of. The car was not headed towards the police station. She realized something was wrong, so she asked the man to get out of the car. The car slowly stopped at that moment. The man suddenly grabbed her hand and pulled out a pistol, pointed at her head and threatened to kill her. However, Khan opened the door, jumped out of the car and ran away. Coincidentally, at that moment a car passed by and she immediately stopped the car and asked them to take her to the police station to report the incident. After some investigation, the police found the suspect, including test Bundy Carroll, recognized him at a glance. From the photos of some of the suspects, and the police's suspicions of the test again increased back to the state. Washington police received a call about Ted Bundy's girlfriend, Elizabeth Kofer. This was not the first time. She first reported to the police a few months ago that she had reported a missing person at Lake X Mid-State Park, but at that time, that the police did not take it seriously. After learning about the disappearances in the city of Utah, she again reported to the police about her boyfriend Test Bundy. This time, the police opened an investigation on him and found out that the test's trajectory matches the location of the disappearances, but other than that, there's nothing else. Any other evidence up to 16 August 1975, while on patrol on the road, a Utah police officer accidentally spotted a B car driving slowly and leisurely in a very likely-looking DNC area. After discovering the police were patrolling, he immediately changed direction and tried to escape, but he was stopped by a police car. Police stopped the car and discovered that the passenger seat of the Beatles car had been removed. There was a snow mask and handcuffs in the car, ropes and other tools, and the driver that is Test, he said. Ski mask is for skiing, handcuffs he picked up in the trash. The rest is just common items. Every day only. He wanted to go to the movies tonight, so he passed by here. The police officer expressed his suspicion about the test's answers after notifying the command center that the police officers are aware that the test is in progress. He was involved in some major cases, so he was brought to the police station. Investigators searched his residence, but nothing was found on the test, and he was later released due to lack of evidence to solve the case. To solve the case, Washington police compiled files on all the recently missing girls and compiled their details. Also list the suspects and have Test Bundy's name on that list. Bundy was born in November 1946. His real name is Theodore Cower, his mother. Test had him instead when she was not married. T's biological father was not responsible and left his mother's family. Fell into Christianity and disliked people, who got pregnant out of wedlock after giving birth at home after the mother had given birth. Leaving him there, Tep's grandfather couldn't stand seeing his grandchildren like that, so he brought Tep home to Philadelphia and, raising him as a son to avoid rumors from the outside world, he asked his family not to reveal his identity. Test's identity is revealed. Of course, the boy Test doesn't know that the father who is raising him is actually his grandfather. Test's maternal grandfather was a violent, paranoid, and severely racist man who often used violence. To solve the problem, under the influence of Mr. I have shown some strange behavior since childhood. For example, when his family, while taking a nap, he would run into the kitchen, get a knife, put it next to his family, then stand by the bed, smiling with satisfaction. I loved reading black magazines and randomly found them around when I was a kid, and would often look through them until 1950 when Test was 4 years old, his mother took him away from Philadelphia and moved to Western Washington. A year later, in 1951, his mother, she married a man and had 4 children. However, she could not integrate into her new family. In high school, he was withdrawn and did not like to interact with others. He often wandered the streets alone, rummaged through the trash in hope to find some discarded porn magazines. When he lay on other people's windows late at night watching women bathing in their homes, he also liked to read some detective and crime novel. 1965, 19 years old, entered university. Pitt saw in South Cedo, then continued to study at Washington University in Central Seat City Center. While in college, Ta started a relationship with a girl named Stephanie Brooke. Stephen came from a rich family. Her family did not appreciate the Test for the above reason, so she dropped out of college and became a driver. He also worked as a bodyguard for government agencies. He wanted to pursue a political career, but the young man tested a bit. Thang wanted to achieve success quickly. His girlfriend felt that he was immature and her family did not like him. So much so that the Test broke up. The incident was a heavy blow to the Test's psychology. This was a big turning point in his life. Test, after the breakup, was very sad. I don't understand why I was suddenly curious about my identity, so I went to investigate. However, after testing, Hong discovered that the father who raised him was actually his grandfather. The sadness of parting was not over yet. Then he fell and met again. Another psychological blow to relieve his depression. He went to Colorado and other places. In the fall of 1969, at age 23, he returned to Washington State and dated a mother. 24-year-old single Elizabeth Kofer will return to college next year. Washington, and continued to study psychology major with high IQ test results. Excellent academic performance and warmly received by university professors. After graduation, Test went to work at a prevention center in Seat, where a specialist named Andrew, along with a former police officer, Zotto, both shared with Test some police crime handling methods that accumulated experience. Report for the next crimes of the Test is reinvigorated. Test again, participate in politics school, help governor. He now defeated his opponents and began a brief political career that lasted until 1973 at the age of 27. Studying law at Seto University Law School on the recommendation of the governor and university professors. He was very handsome and charming young. He was in his glory days and had reconnected with his girlfriend. The old step-in opponent was also very surprised by the changes of the past few years, and the two soon rekindled the flame. The fire of love, but the two girls still maintain a relationship. Not knowing the other's existence after dating Tiffany for a while, he proposed to her. Stepan was very happy about that and started introducing the test to her fiancé's friends right when the two were about to get married. The test suddenly fish land all contact with Stephanie. She can't even contact Test. That makes her very sad and all. Those things were all planned by Test Bundy. Test's purpose was to get revenge for the breakup that year to come back too. In the fall of 1969, 24-year-old Elizabeth was living alone in Seattle with her child. She met Test in a bar near the university. They talked in the bar that night and spent the night together. The next morning, he personally made breakfast for Elizabeth. A man like that made Elizabeth very admired. There was a time when the two often went out together to play test on her daughter. Elizabeth is very good. Sometimes on weekends he often comes home early to take care of his daughter, very much like a father. Elizabeth came from a wealthy family in Utah. Her father was a courtesan after a. During the date, she brought Test home to meet her parents. Test's elegant style left a good impression on her family. Elizabeth feels ashamed of her life experiences and decides to join politics or upper class. In 5 years on the side, Elizabeth was pregnant. When she fell, she was still in college so as not to affect her studies. Elizabeth chose to have an abortion. Time passed. Elizabeth finds out that Test is regularly dating other girls, without letting her know, in retaliation for Test dating her. With a man, the purpose is to make T jealous, but T con quan tam in the end, she can only use alcohol too. To relieve her sadness, she did not want to leave him in early 1974 in the Ceto area, where there were many girls. The girls started disappearing. The police released the suspect's portrait to the public. When they saw the portrait, Elizabeth. The portrait feels very similar to Elizabeth's boyfriend during the time she was not living with him. Living in another rented house nearby, had the conditions to commit the crime after 2 incidents. Missing Elizabeth began to suspect and asked the guy where he had been that day, but the other person was hesitant and vague. Did not want to answer, and the suspect information given by the police mentioned that the suspect was driving a Blee car. Test's car is also a Beetle car. In one of Elizabeth's accidental found a deal in the car of the Test. Not only that, she also found a pair of crutches, a bag of plaster, and a sack of neck. The woman in the house was shot. After seeing the items on Elizabeth wanted to know the truth, so she went to Test too. Confronted with him, unexpectedly, Test directly threatened that if she dared to tell anyone else, he would not forgive her. However, Elizabeth still told the story to a close friend under the guise of her best friend's clothes made her pluck up the courage and call the police. But these were just her words without any solid evidence. Police received similar reports almost every day, so at first, they didn't let much time pass. In 1975 to Test went to Sake Utah City, where another attack on women. Elizabeth felt, seeing that it couldn't be a coincidence and that it was definitely a test, she called the police again. This police officer came to Elizabeth and asked her for some information about the cases. The recent case revealed that the suspect may have suffered from severe sexual desire, so investigators asked Elizabeth personal questions regarding Test's sex life. She said that Test has some sexual desires, and he also likes to read books and newspapers about it. That the police from their more suspicious Test next step is to find out the evidence. In September 1975, Test sold his bit car after getting. The police immediately seized the car and conducted a detailed investigation of the results on the car found. Many of the hairs were later identified as belonging to 3 victims in the series of cases: Melissa Smith, Karen Campbell, and Karen Daron, who reported to the police at the beginning of the video. Melissa went missing in Utah and was Kai was found the following day with bruises from blunt force trauma to the head and sexual assault. Kin was a nurse. The professional disappeared while on vacation in Colorado and was found a month later on a remote road. She was naked with many open wounds on her body and was violated, although the location. The three cases are different, but their hair was found in the police car. Washington has established contacts with police in several other states. After exchanging information on some of the cases they have recently solved. Together discovered that the cases that happened in many places above could be committed by the same person, and that person was Test Bundy. With important evidence in hand, the police arrested Test, but he refused to plead guilty and maintained his innocence because the evidence the prosecutor had was limited, making it difficult to convict. To win the case if only hair was involved, so the prosecutor could only charge Test on the kidnapping charges. February 20. In 1976, the case was officially brought to trial and witness Cleda D. testified before the jury. The court affirmed that the person who tried to corner her that night was the defendant. The court ruled that the evidence was important. Regarding the hair found in Test Bundy's car, the court declared the defendant Test Bundy guilty of kidnapping and sentenced him to 15 years. Years in prison after Tyan's sentence, prosecutors continue to charge Test with 2 crimes. First-degree murder with Melissa and Kin. Test, then transferred to Colorado for trial until June 0, 1977. The case was tried in Pitkin County Court. In Colorado, the testator asked to act as his own attorney to defend himself and his wife. The judge agreed to release Test from handcuffs and shackles, insulting that such serious cases often have to be tried multiple times each year. During the long trial, the Test went to the library on the second floor of the courthouse for research purposes. He searched for information and wandered between rows of bookshelves, but when no one was looking, he rushed to a window and jumped out. That caused a sprained ankle, but was still able to walk after the court. He passed through the Edon floating towards the south of the mountain. Edon, where Test stole food, clothes, and a rifle from a house in the mountains, then went deep into the road. After 2 days of hiding, he moved to Lake Meron, where he stole food and clothes from a stranger. Camped before continuing to escape until June 13, 1977, after 6 days of escape. Unable to bear the cold weather and his leg injury getting worse, he decided to steal a car and returned to Apple for treatment. He was later discovered by 2 patrol officers on the street and arrested, then taken to county jail. Garf lawyer and friends of the prosecution said that the current evidence of the prosecution could not prove his guilt as long as he remained calm. He could still be found innocent, but he also knew the law and had his own ideas in mind at the time. He had already planned to escape from prison, but escaping was extremely difficult and he could not succeed alone. Then remembered a friend named Karen B. She was a former colleague of Test and had a crush on Test for a long time. Once visiting the prison, Karen secretly gave Test some my thigh and Test sold it to another dealer for $500 and then used the money to test it. He bought a steel mechanism and a blueprint of the prison. He used his daily shower time to use the steel mechanism to bore a hole in the prison. The ceiling above the cell was a ventilation shaft, but he discovered that the ventilation shaft was very narrow and could not be ventilated. Fit his current size, then fell and lost 16 kg thanks to dieting. And finally, he was able to get into the ventilation shaft every night, climbing into the ventilation shaft to scout for other prisoners. Heard a sound coming from above and immediately reported it to the jailers. However, the jailers thought it could be footsteps. The mice passed by, so they didn't pay much attention. They spent many nights exploring the ventilation ducts, although they couldn't find a way out. outside the prison, but he found the warden's office at that time. A new plan was forming in his head. Of Test until December 30, 1977, that day was still the birthday of many. Prisoners are still at home on Christmas morning. This is the laxest time of year for prisons. That day, 31 people fell ill. He began his escape by placing a stack of books on the cell bed and covering it with a blanket, looking from the outside like a... The man was sleeping in the blanket. Then he crawled into the ventilation duct on the ceiling. He moved little by little, afraid he would, causing a commotion and being discovered. He finally made it to the warden's office and continued wearing his uniform. The warden then walked out of the prison door in a grand manner until noon the next day. The warden went on patrol and discovered. Test escaped from prison at that time. Test moved to Chicago after. Test escaped from prison. The FBI also launched a nationwide manhunt for him after Test arrived in Chicago. Stayed there for a short time, then went to Florida. He rented a room near Florida State University and wanted to remain anonymous to get a job, but because he couldn't use his real identity, he had to commit theft afterwards. Committed many assaults and murders in the area. The victims were all beautiful young girls until 12th of the month. 2 years 1978, more than 1 month after the fall of hell, did not have a penny in his pocket and no money. He couldn't pay the rent, so he stole another car and started his escape 3 days later on October 15, 2005. In 1978, he was stopped by the police in his car. They found his identification papers. Of several female students, many credit cards were stolen, and a television was stolen in 1979. Fell 33 years old, had to serve. A Florida court, in order to maintain a good image before a jury, asked Carol Bull, a single mother, to Test. He went to court and lied. Carol believed that Test was innocent from the beginning to the end of the evidence. The inmates' convictions were not enough, so they proposed a plea deal that did not require the death penalty. Test must admit to killing 3 victims and apologize to their families. However, Test only considers the above plea agreement as a measure to avoid the death penalty, but Test just wants more time to add more legal loopholes and possibly. He was later released from prison and apologized to the victim's family and eventually refused to accept a plea deal until June 1979. The trial began as hundreds of press agencies waited outside the court during the hearing of the defense's witnesses. Prosecutors said they saw the murder weapon being taken out and present at the crime scene, in addition to people. Storks found teeth marks on the left buttock of one of the victims. Experts compared the teeth marks and found them identical with T. Bundy's teeth marks after more than 1 month of trial lasting until 24/0/2018. 1979, the case came to a close. The court convicted the defendant of 2 counts. The first-degree murder and death penalty case caused a stir across the United States and attracted a lot of attention. Public opinion Test Bundy handsome and charming, but his supporters do not believe that he would do it. Even someone sent love letters and gifts to T.N. In prison in January 1980, another murder trial involved. To the Test held in Orlando City during the trial, Test supporters came from all over the United States. Some people gave the love letter to Test's defense attorney at that time. Test had completely become a star at once. Said in an interview with reporters that the Test seemed unlikely to replicate the remarkable fact that during the trial also had a Test kiss scene in front of the judge, which turned out to be. After falling into jail, Clee asked Test to marry her for a stronger relationship. Test also made that request with the prison administration but was refused. Clee told Test that she knew a Florida secret law that if Test proposes to her in front of a judge, they can legally get married. That's why Test did it in court. In the case, The jury deliberated for 8 hours, and the results, they unanimously declared the Test guilty, and as a result, the jury sentenced the Test to death. During the trial, Carol frequently visited the prison and bribed the guards to get the chance to be alone with Test during prison, and then she got pregnant after the trial started. The appeal process dragged on. A reporter interviewed him, but he was very cautious in his answers and avoided mentioning some important issues. He reveals his initial crimes and change of heart through a third narrative in which he initially killed just because property, but then the desire became the main reason to avoid being denounced by the victim. Then he killed them. They contacted an FBI crime analyst and a biographer. The man was so shocked by the satisfaction that he told of the murders that he considered himself an amateur in his early days. And it wasn't until 1974 that he began his serial killings. However, he didn't. Willing to reveal the details of the case from beginning to end in July 1984, C. second in command. Seeing 2 iron blades hidden in Test's cell and suspecting he was trying to escape, they checked the room. They found that the steel bar on the cell window had been removed and then glued back together with homemade soap glue. The Test was moved to another cell, and a few months later, the guards found illegal mirrors in his cell. He and the Test were transferred to October 1984. Robert Klee, one of the investigators. Key investigator on the 1984 Test, Robert, began his involvement in the murder investigation. After knowing about the case, Zhuangzhan analyzed the psychological activities of the murderer Zhuangzhan in his letter. And proceeded to create a psychological profile of the perpetrator. I hope it can help the police solve the problem. The purpose of the case was to avoid the death penalty until the 1986 execution date was set for January 1989. The trial exhausted all avenues of confirmation. But as time passed, evidence. The more he tests, the more he can avoid the penalty. Signed the plea agreement, but now it was too late. He had voluntarily confessed to all the crimes he had committed, but he refused to describe the details involved in attempting to delay the execution of the death penalty by means of one of the Test supporter Diana Were has been campaigning since Test was sentenced to death. Some victims' families hope they will plead with the Florida governor, but their families flatly refuse. The gunmen said they no longer wanted to plead guilty and just wanted him to be executed as soon as possible. The governor said he would not delay the decision on the Test and criticized the behavior of those who supported it. Has pleaded not guilty since his arrest and did not admit to committing at least 30 murders until he actually facing the death penalty. A man said he wasn't sure how many people he killed the night before his execution. The police have counted some of the victims from Washington state, including 11 people, including 3 unidentified in Utah, 8 unidentified in Colorado, 3 unidentified in Florida, 3 2 people in Oregon, both unidentified, 2 people in Idaho, an unidentified person in California, an unidentified person in which there are several cases. It is noteworthy that at midnight on October 4, 197, a man entered the apartment below the basement of an 18-year-old college student named Ken Spark after attacking Miss Invincible with a metal bar from the bed frame. He used that very stick to violate her and seriously injure her. The girl was lucky to survive and was unconscious for 10 days, with injuries that would follow her for the rest of her life. Early morning on the 0th of the month, 2 same-year tests break into the room of a female student, Linda, and Hell take charge. Mission to broadcast radio news to the snowman. He beat up Helly, dressed her in jeans, blue with a white blue shirt and a pair of shoes, and then took her away on August 0, 1974. He violated and strangled her. On October 2, 1974, He abducted a man asking for a ride in Idaho and immediately dumped his body in a nearby river. Nancy Wink, 16, of Holiday, a suburb of Lake City, was found dead. Buried near Capitol National Park on October 31, 1974, he captured a 17-year-old girl named Ra Andy after leaving the cafe following the trespassing. He dumped her body in the American Forex Canyon at 7:16 a.m. on the 24th. January 1989, 42-year-old Tess Bundy was put to the electric chair at the Florida State Penitentiary. Ended his life of crime after learning of the death of hundreds of people who had worn Ho Tren, Dong Ko Doi opposite. Prison some see sing some firework everyone celebrate because of the bastard cause. That disgusting person was sentenced to death. Tess supporters were very sad after hearing the news and some fan women were depressed. Nervous after hearing the news of Tess's death, and with the three girls who had a relationship with Tess, the first one was Stefan's ex-girlfriend. Married someone else right after being tested for revenge, Elizabeth finally saw the true face of the test after. He was imprisoned and quickly married someone else. And Carol, after learning of the test's guilty plea, finally confessed. Also realizing how deeply she was troubled by the fire, she took her children with her and began to live anonymously. The story of Tess was adapted into many movies in the decades that followed. Ironically, he murdered many girls but became the most admired serial killer by girls in the United States. Today's video ends here and see you in the next videos.